Attackers almost always go after the weakest link when they're attacking a system or an organization. And oftentimes this is found in the supply chain. Now, supply chain, if you think normally a supply chain would refer to how you ship goods and services, boats, trains, trucks, airplanes. But in cybersecurity, we're thinking of supply chain as how organizations are receiving maybe their IT equipment, their software, things of that nature. Supply chain can also be services that the organization purchases, and we'll get into that when we show you an example. So attackers might find that points along the supply chain are more vulnerable to attacks, or vendors that service an organization have less security practices, less strict security standards than the actual organization itself. So it's important as a cybersecurity professional to evaluate your vendors on a periodic basis to ensure that they are following the correct cybersecurity standards that your organization is holding its own data to, and to ensure that there's no seams for an attacker to exploit. If you're receiving software, you need to make sure that your software developers are performing secure coding practices. They're following a secure software development lifecycle. And if you're getting different pieces of hardware, you might want to evaluate that hardware, and we'll talk about the different frameworks that are used to evaluate that hardware, like the common criteria, later in the course. A good example of this, to get your head around it, is the Target hack of 2013. So in 2013, over 40 million credit card numbers were stolen by Target, or from Target. Attackers, they didn't go after Target, the organization itself. They didn't go after the company. What they did was they targeted a supplier, somebody along the supply chain, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning supplier for many of the Target department stores. So what they did, the HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning provider, had a special backdoor into Target's network to help manage and administer these heating and air conditioning units in these department stores. They had a special VPN. So what the attackers did, they compromised the HVAC supplier. They found that it was much easier to compromise that network than to go after Target, who spent millions of dollars on cybersecurity. So they targeted the vendor, and from the vendor, they just accessed the Target network from the vendor's VPN, using the vendor's VPN. And from there, they were already seen as trusted in the network because they were accessing through a VPN. They bypassed all the perimeter defense, and they were able to steal all these credit card numbers. So that's where your supply chain can really come into play, and why it's important to evaluate the supply chain vendors, especially in today's world.